Hey everybody, in this semi-official, unofficial Glass Half Dead channel shutdown, I'm playing a few of my oldies because some of them I think are really good. So enjoy whatever it is I'm showing today, and don't forget to check out my new channel if you want to see Warhammer lore read to you for some reason. Hello everyone, Glass Half Dead here, and today in this video right here I'm going to be covering Tau lore, and apparently I'm going to do it as a disembodied head with hands. Except there are no hands because I haven't figured out how to do that with the green screen yet, but whatever. Pretend they're there. But I don't know, pretend I'm a head, like a drone or a servo skull or something, because that makes a lot more sense than a disembodied head. The Tau. Who are they? What are they? Why are they? And why do they get memed so hard? That's right. We're going from the basics to the weirdly niche to the unique meta outside the game that is the Tau race. By the end of this video, you will go from knowing nothing about the Tau, as obviously nobody does, to having a grasp on the role they play in the larger 40k story and universe. Now, I will not be going into any of their weird mecha suit designations or their named characters. Those get their own video later. But hopefully I can make some of you realise why the Tau, the race that is literally in no way, shape or form any threat to any other race, are worth paying attention to. Let's start with the basics. Tau. With most of Games Workshop's factions, the name says a lot. Space Marines. They're Marines in space. Pretty self-explanatory, yeah. Imperial Guard. The army of an imperial state. Eldar. Elves. But in space, obviously. Necrons. I don't know. Why? What? Huh? Anyway, what can we glean from the word Tau? Well, it's a letter of the Greek alphabet, and it's a mathematical principle. What? Okay, it's not actually as weird as it sounds. Games Workshop like to break things back to their Latin or Greek roots when it comes to naming things. Hence the Greek alphabet thing. And the Tau as a race are, without doubt, presented as the most technologically advanced faction in the 40k setting, hence them having something to do with maths instead of space magic. Now, we could argue that the Necrons or Eldar technically have more advanced weaponry, but they present as ancient techno-magic, which is based firmly in fantasy. The Tau, very distinctly, both in their design, their naming, and their lore, are based in science. Therefore, they are the most advanced race in the universe, despite also being the youngest. That's right. Tau are the youngest faction both in-game and out of game. Cast your weary minds back to 3rd edition 40k, 2001. An apt year to release the Tau, thanks to Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't know why I'm saying this. It's in the script. I wrote it. I guess here we are. Anyway, that's thanks to Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey being a film ahead of its time, a real sci-fi epic exploring themes of advanced technology and how AI will interact with humans in the future. And now, the race that is also well ahead of its time, exploring themes of advanced technology and how AI will interact with humans in the future. An auspicious year. Also, the Tau as a faction are now old enough to drink in the UK and all of Europe and most of Asia. Literally everywhere, apart from North America. But I mean, whatever, totally not weird. And you guys have guns at that age, so I guess you kind of win, I guess. Also, still on a real world note, they very neatly claim an aesthetic that didn't exist in 40k. The anime Gundam market. Now, this could have been a random similarity, but considering anime comes from Japan, and the Tau society in-game is very, very heavily inspired by Japanese culture, and is very explicitly mentioned as coming from the far east of the universe, well, let's move on to the in-universe faction. The Tau faction occupies a small little empire in the east of the universe, as just mentioned. An awfully small little empire, in fact. For a faction that is so advanced, why are they such a small force? Well, every other race in 40k travels through space via, for lack of a better term, magic. But Tau are forced to make their way at a much more realistic pace. They are not able to travel faster than light. They're reduced to a snail's pace, and they don't have warp travel. There's no 10,000 light years being travelled in 60 days for the Tau. But why can't they travel in the warp? Good question. They're the most advanced race. Surely cobbling together a warp drive can't be that hard. I mean, even the Kroot can build one. So, the answer is pretty simple. To invent something, typically, you have to know it exists. But the Tau are not a psychic race. They have no presence in the warp. Minor correction. They are not psychic gnolls or anything. They just don't have a strong presence. Where Eldar humans have the potential to interact with the warp for good or for evil, but mainly evil, because they're dirty heretics, the Tau do not have this potential. Equally, an Eldar human soul burns like a bright beacon to any warp entity nearby, much like a hot wing among chips. Now, this does lead to many unexplored questions in the lore. As Tau have a very weak warp signature, are they actually able to run covert missions in warp space? Maybe. Can they interact with the warp and have a reduced risk of succumbing to madness? Now that they know the warp exists, can they harness it and use it, but retain their fortitude against it, thereby making them easily the strongest race in the galaxy? Maybe. These are hypotheticals I have no answers. I have no answers here, guys. None. Are they basically Frodo and the warp is the One Ring? Why haven't they been given awesome mercenary allies that are psychers yet? Where are my psychic Kroot, G-dubs? Kroot gain powers by eating their enemy. I'm positive they've eaten a psyker or two. We know Kroot have their own warp engines, so... Games Workshop dropping the ball on that one anyway. Again. Moving on, the Tau began their life on an arid desert world called, rather shockingly, Tau. However, due to copyright reasons, I shall now pronounce the name correctly once and once only. Are you ready? Tau. Apparently, Games Workshop never learned good fancy naming conventions and figured an apostrophe was a good idea in the middle of an otherwise normal word. More on that in another video. The Tau race separated itself out into 4 different factions. Fire, earth, air, and waterbenders. No, sorry, castes. They all decided to fight against each other because they were different, and as we all know from real-world politics, those different from us deserve to die. The water caste are the diplomats and the admin. These guys are out there winning the hearts and minds of the enemy. The earth caste are the builders. The core of the Tau faction, as we know by now, is their amazing technology, and that is all provided by the earth caste, so daps for them. The air caste are the pilots. Yeah, honestly, they got the short straw of the lore on this one, lads. Sorry. They're taller and skinnier with hollow bones because they used to fly around the mountain tops like birds. Let's not go into just how that would not translate into being a good zero-G pilot and move on. We don't have time. The fire caste. These are the guys we see on the tabletop and are the most relevant to us as players. Due to the caste structure of Tau society, more on that later, don't worry, those born into the fire caste are trained from birth how to fight. They are brought up alongside their fire warrior teams and go from children to fully fledged combatants. Every single day of their life, they are trained to fight. Now, logically, that should make them some of the best damn fighters in the universe. Okay, there are space marines that have more training due to their long lives, but these Tau are no slouches and should be far better trained and with better discipline than any regular human. But they're not. Okay, let's talk Tau physiology. The average Tau firecast is around 5'6". That's 168 centimeters for everyone that isn't American, and is notably slower and weaker than a regular human. They also have relatively bad eyesight, comparatively speaking, which accounts for their low ballistic skill in-game. But their will and discipline is iron, so it's fine. Okay, so why do they have such bad leadership? So they are fearless warriors, no doubt. They are also the most pragmatic faction in 40k and value living to fight a more balanced battle another day than giving their life in a useless last stand. No, really, there are instances in Black Library books where Tau are reprimanded by their commanders for staying in hopeless situations even if they end up winning the engagement. They are the ultimate pragmatist. And a little personal side note here, this actually makes Tau the only race where, apples to apples, they are weaker than humans. Aside from the Tau, according to canon, humans are the weakest individuals among the playable factions. Odd as it might sound, the Tau are the underdogs, and I think we can all agree that a well-done underdog story is the best damn story there is. Can Games Workshop make that happen narratively? No, of course not. But let's ignore that. Okay, still on their biology here. They have hooves. It's believed their noses are actually located inside their mouth. The weird forehead crease isn't actually anything at all. It's just a crease in their head. It's just a head butt. A butt head? A butt head, if you will. They have multiple stomachs. It's not stated how many, but more than one. They also blindly follow a leading caste, the Ethereals. Let's think it through. Hooves, headbutts, hidden noses, multiple stomachs, and follow others without thought. They're sheep. They are so clearly based off sheep, it's weird. Why on earth did Games Workshop make a race of blue anthropomorphic sheep? Genuinely baffling. But there we go. Let's discuss the fifth caste. The other blue boys that we're going to see on the tabletop. The Ethereal Car. These guys are shrouded in mystery and legend, none of which I believe, to be honest, quite frankly. These are the ruling elite. To be an Ethereal is to have control of any other town. Now, there's lots of speculation about why these guys are the leaders of the town. The official background writing says that there were bright lights in the sky one night when all of the castes were at war, and the next day, the Ethereals stopped the war and united the race. Which is either a parable as told by the Ethereals to make themselves seem heavenly, but is actually nonsense and who really knows, or is true, which means that Ethereals are 100% an alien species, because those were definitely spaceships in the sky, let's be honest. Probably Eldar spaceships. But whatever, that's all speculation, and there's no point going into it. There's also an entire pheromone conspiracy regarding Norn queens, but it doesn't matter, there's no proof. How the Ethereals first gained control of the Tau simply isn't known, but they have built up a societal structure now where they are obeyed without question, regardless of any dodgy powers they may or may not have once had or had not, but no longer seem to. To sum up the Ethereal caste, anything they say goes. They are the undisputed leaders over the other four castes. Within their own caste, they act as a council, discussing issues with each other. But there is still a supreme Ethereal. That's about it. Now let's talk expansion spheres. No, not some weird sex thing. Due to the Tau's lack of warp capability, when they want to expand and take territory, they do it all as one big concerted push. Which I think from a tactical perspective makes literally no sense, but whatever, it's their thing, I guess. So they have something called a sphere of expansion. So far they've had 5. In the next codex, presumably, we get the 6th sphere of expansion, that's hard to say. With every push out, they subsume more worlds into the greater good. However, the 4th sphere was actually a catastrophic failure, ending with the loss of the entire Tau fleet, until around a decade later when a wormhole mysteriously turned up in Tau space. To cut a very long story short, the Tau had developed a warp engine and had success with individual ships, but when they tried to warp jump an entire fleet, they rent a hole in reality and the entire fleet was, put into the realm of chaos. The warp. Classic 40k, really. Turns out, they'd been warped to an as yet unknown location somewhere in the galaxy, and although yes, most of the fleet had been destroyed, a few still survived. They made contact, and now the Tau have a new part of space to explore, so yay! Very much needed, because they still haven't cracked faster than light travel on more than a single ship. Now, why is it good that this wormhole turned up? because actually the Tau were in a bit of a pinch when it came to intergalactic placement. They had these bizarre Admech void fires to the west, gathering bands of orcs to their south, Tyranids to their east, and Necrons to their north. Any direction they expanded in would have only invited war, not peace. And of course, peace and harmony and doing things for the betterment of other people is the entire point of the Tau's reason for existing, as exemplified by their motto. For the greater good. Oh, damn. The greater good. Okay, right. So let's discuss the Tau's general philosophy to the outside world, right? May as well do it now. The Tau's catchphrase is, for the greater good. Or in their language, Tauva. Or if I were to pronounce the apostrophes in that word, Ta'auva. It's what they're brought up on. They will kill themselves without hesitation if it aided the Tau society as a whole. Equally, as mentioned previously, it would be considered a grave sin in Tau culture to get yourself killed if it didn't aid the rest of the Tau. Straight up, some people are more valuable alive than dead. This is something that the Grimdark setting of 40k really struggles with, let's be honest. The idea that not getting yourself killed in a heroic last stand can possibly be a good thing. This philosophy is pervasive through everything they do. In their minds, they do everything for the greater good. Who decides what is and is not for the greater good? Well, the Ethereals, obviously. They judge everything, and the rest of the Tau enact that judgment. Good thing they're all-knowing and completely immune to corruption, so that's fine. Yeah. This is where we get another unique facet of the Tau faction. They actually are not xenophobic. Weird, I know. They're the only playable race that are not killing every alien they see. They're expanding their empire to gain territory to spread the greater good to others, whereas every other race is basically expanding their territory to put their own people on said worlds so they can kill aliens. I mean, that's a shortened version, but yeah, that's basically it. In the Tau army, you have access to Kroot and Vespers on the tabletop, but in the fiction, there's mention of many others working with the Tau, including the Demiurge, who are basically space dwarves, which means squats still exist. Oh, and actually in the game Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2, we actually get to see what a Kroot and Demiurge ship look like, which is pretty cool. We're still on the greater good, remember? So, the Tau send their fleets out to a poor, unsuspecting planet and have their watercasts meet up and begin diplomatic relations. Now, the Tau are genuinely willing to accept other races. I know I'm repeating myself, but in 40k it's just very weird. So the watercast gets sent in, and these guys, or girls, probably girls, let's be honest, because you know how humans are, and begin deciding how best to assimilate the world and the culture into Tau society. And while the Tau impose the very strict caste structure upon themselves, they tend to be a lot more relaxed when it comes to their alien allies, accepting that as long as they become part of the Tau, then they are aiding the greater good. Quick side note, there are some theories at this point from people that don't like the idea of a faction actually being not xenophobic, thinking it's not grimdark enough, and so they theorize that the Tau are actually playing the long game and are mass sterilizing these allied races to slowly kill them off after a few generations. But there's no proof this happens on a large scale, and also I really wish that I'd put some commas in that sentence. But let's be clear about one thing. If the Tau begin negotiations with you, then you are boned. The negotiation is a formality, and you're negotiating terms of just how quickly you will be assimilated into Tau society. You join the greater good or you die. Simple as that. The Tau will bring down their full might upon any world that doesn't accept their very kind and generous offer. While talking about Tau allies, we must of course mention the Grave Asa. These are humans that have joined the Tau Empire. While not represented on the tabletop, these are very easy conversions to make as basic arm, torso or head swaps for the majority of your army will have your Imperial Guard units quickly tooled up as Tau with pulse rifles. Lore-wise, these could be a lone band of mercenaries that went to the highest bidder. The greater good is not above paying people, they pay all their Kroot, for example. Or perhaps they're a planetary defense force from an assimilated world. There are lots of valid reasons humans could be fighting alongside Tau. Let's jump back quickly to the caste structure. I really want to reinforce just how rigid this is. It's not a sensible thing like, hey, you have a natural aptitude for tinkering with electronics, let's put you in the Earth caste. No. You are born into a caste and you stay in that caste until you die. And if you're not good in that caste, they make sure you die sooner rather than later. It's never specifically stated how you are assigned a caste, so the assumption is that it's based on parentage. The reason for this is that as the generations have gone on, although all Tau started from the same species, they are now rather radically different. It's never actually mentioned specifically, but I don't think an Earth caste Tau could give birth to an Air caste Tau, for example. And this is a rigid structure. Rigid. And I mean stupidly so. There's a story involving one of the main Tau commanders, Farsight. For those that don't know, he pilots one of the Tau's cool-looking crisis suits that I have hopefully, if I'm paying any attention while editing, put up somewhere on the screen behind this floating head that is technically mine. This story takes place back when he was still talking to the main Ethereals and still climbing the ranks in the army, but he was already a commander and well respected. His suit gets shot down, and let's just say he hits the drink harder than a poorly characterized Swedish detective. He sinks to the bottom and the suit is fully powered down. Water is leaking into the compartment and he's about to drown. He needs to repair the crisis suit, power it up and fly away. Except he's a member of the Fire caste. It's the Earth caste that invent, build and repair all of the Tau's technology, including the crisis suits. Anyway, he manages to repair the suit and fly away. You know, because he's a named character and literally nothing bad ever happens to them in any novels. Later in the book, this is brought to the attention of the Ethereals, and they say that he should have died at the bottom of that lake, and the fact that he didn't proves he's not truly part of the Tau. Keeping in mind that these same Ethereals also accept that Farsight is the only commander with enough skill to currently win the battle for the planet they're on. That's right, they would rather lose the planet than have the general Tau population know that living outside of the caste structure is even a possibility. And the Ethereals would let themselves die in that as well, because they understand just how important the for the greater good mentality is to keeping themselves at the top of the hierarchy. It's full on, if the little guys know how powerful they are, then the guys at the top will crumble. It's proper Soviet Russia communist stuff. Your basic fire warrior is allowed to put their armor on, reload their gun, maybe clear a jam, but that's it. If they do anything more advanced, they would be executed if anyone else found out. And of course, the Ethereals have bred into the general populace just how terrible, one could say heretical, it is for any Tau to break the caste structure. In fact, it was one of Farsight's friends that turned him into the Ethereals. That's how deep and twisted their caste structure runs. It's a horrible prison of birthright and genealogy, but actually still better than the Imperium for your average run-of-the-mill dude, so swings and roundabouts, I guess. Now, when one of the worlds does resist, the Tau have two schools of thought. There is the Montkar and the Cao Yon. The Montkar is the way of the killing blow. It's fast, hard, aggressive, just how women like it. They strike mercilessly and in overwhelming force. If the killing blow doesn't land, they will fall back and attack again another time after disengaging. The Cao Yon is much the opposite and involves luring the enemy into a perfectly orchestrated trap. It's an ambush. It's an ambush, yeah. It should be noted, as mentioned elsewhere, that the Tau have no compunction about running away. It's better to live to fight another day than to die and never fight again. They won't defend a city that doesn't need defending or plant their flag on a random hill. Not their style. They're far too pragmatic. Also, the Tau tend to be very heavy on air support. Strong air units in the lore. Now, with the best technology in the galaxy and a rigid military trained from birth, the Tau must be a big player on the intergalactic plane, right? Well, in a word, no. The Tau are basically the least threatening faction in the entire 40k universe. Don't get me wrong, they are set up to be the strongest faction, 100%. But they need about 10,000 years to get there, probably. You see, the problem is they're only like 5,000 years old as a race. Now, yes, in that time they've advanced further than any other race, but it's basic manpower. They don't have it. They simply do not have the numbers to pose a credible threat to any other faction in 40k. Well, maybe the Eldar factions, actually, but that's a debate for another day. But to the Imperium, the Tau are barely a blip on the radar next to Chaos, Tyranids, Orcs, Necrons, and, well, everything else. Now, the Tau have had run-ins with other factions. Their biggest and most commonly encountered enemy are actually Orcs, that seem to show up everywhere they try to expand to. They faced Tyranids, and High Fleet Gorgon left part of their sector a husk of nothingness that they now call the Zone of Silence. They've only really had one big major conflict with the full might of the Imperium, and that was the Damocles Crusade, which, by the way, ended with them being pushed back across the Damocles Gulf, and the Adeptus Mechanicus using some crazy interstellar techno-warp fire thing to make the Gulf basically impassable to the Tau. However, that is also where Farsight went rogue, and he set up his own colonies on the other side of that. So from a lore perspective, the Tau is still there. Let's discuss a bit of the advanced technology that we don't really see in the Imperium. First up is cloning. The Tau can clone organic matter. We've seen them successfully clone Space Marines, in fact. They can vat-grow anything as far as we know, including replacements for Tau members. Perhaps. More on that in another video though. There's also artificial intelligence. This is a technology that is completely outlawed in the Imperium due to a war between humanity and robots. Well, the Tau haven't had that yet, and they make full use of AI in all of their technology. Even their drones have AI. In some of the novels, the drones are shown as having personalities. More personality in the more advanced drones, and a slightly more basic personality in the regular gun drones. But it's still there. They haven't really made much of this fact on the tabletop, which I think is a real shame, but that's how things go. Also, I have to give a final mention to something I said I was going to cover at the beginning of the video. Why are the Tau memed and made fun of more than any other faction in 40k? Why are they regularly called fish people? Well, that's for the naming video, so I can't fix that here. This video is running hella long, so let's just get it out of the way. They're called space communists because for the greater good is literally communist propaganda, the ideal of giving up one's life for the betterment of the state. It doesn't really need anything else said. They're called space communists because they are literally communists in space. And then they're made fun of the most because, stylistically, they are big mech suits and robots that got chucked into a galaxy that, up until that point, had been based entirely off Geiger, Lovecraft, and Gothic architecture. They're just weird, stylistically, and some people really don't like that aesthetic invasion. Now, they've always been hated for those reasons, but more recently they've gotten even more hate because in 6th edition, they were straight up overpowered. It was nuts. They were not fun to play or play against. In 8th now, they're fine. But they still have a bit of a stigma attached to them because it's only been like 6 years. Now, guys, there's so much more I could have covered, but trying to keep a beginner's guide to Tau lore concise means some things have to be cut. If you want to know more yourself, I would highly recommend the Tau Codex as your first port of call. Outside of that, I recommend the Black Library novel Blade of Damocles, although a big warning, some of the events and character building in there have been heavily retconned. There are also a lot of short stories, but actually, I've only read one that really added anything to the Tau lore. All of the others were little more than bolter porn, and I genuinely wouldn't recommend them. In fact, you know what? I can sum them up for you right now. The Tau are hiding in bushes, and then they shoot a human, and then a riptide turns up, and they win. Yep, there you go. I just saved you a lot of money and time. You're welcome. I'm really hoping to get a new Tau novel in the coming year, because they haven't had any advancement in the story for quite a while now. But they are set up so perfectly for something big to happen. They're beset on all sides. They've just encountered demons for the first time and managed to travel to the other side of the galaxy through the warp without a Geller field and survived, which also gave them new and undefined parts of space for them to explore. It's all great stuff narratively for the Tau. I'm excited. I'm also glass half dead, and I'm also saying goodbye.